I can't sleep. It's like 4 in the morning and I can't sleep. I watched the interview that Mr. McDonough did on the interview room with Hunter on the Summer Wells case. You know, the 15-year-old boy that was along for the ride the day she came up missing. And I went through it like 2 or 3 times and I made some notes because I'm telling you what, it's something else, guys. You have to watch it. But I'm just going to go over some notes I made. Okay, this whole thing starts out with Hunter saying that Candace texted him in the morning saying that Grandma's knee was hurt. And Grandma, I'm going to refer to Grandma as Candace's mom. Okay, so, excuse my voice, it's a little hoarse. So she texts Hunter to tell him that they're taking Grandma to the ER. And he actually invites her over. Okay, so he invites Candace and Summer over to their house. And then she said, yeah, if it's okay with your mom. So he goes and asks his mom if it's okay. Apparently she was still sleeping. But she said, yeah, when he woke her up. So Candace arrives with Summer. And the boy, Hunter, he wasn't clear. It was somewhere between 10 and 11. So let's say it was about 10:30. Candace shows up. And for some reason, she told him that the boys went to work with Dawn that day. And he mentioned 2 of the boys by name, but he didn't mention the third one. So maybe just 2 of them supposedly went to work with Dawn. Okay, so that's really interesting because, you know, she had said the boys stayed home to clean the house or something. Okay, so now this story is getting crazier and crazier, guys. I mean, it's unbelievable. Okay, so now Hunter mentioned that he hadn't seen Candace in a while, but that he had also blocked her from Snapchat chat after a while. He didn't say why. I don't know if he meant after this happened or before this happened. But she comes into Hunter's house, and she talked about a trip they had just taken to Gatlinburg, and apparently that's how Grandma hurt her knee. But then she blames it on the kids. She blames Grandma's knee being hurt on the kids kicking her on that trip. Now, okay, that's my first red flag, because first of all, why is she blaming the kids? Second of all, the mom, the grandma, obviously she had a knee replacement, is what, I've heard in several reports. And you can't tell me that the kids were kicking her that hard that her knee replacement got out of alignment or something, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Okay. Now, the next thing that happens is Hunter, now that Candace and Summer are at their house, they said something about going fishing, or Candace mentioned something about taking Summer fishing. And he says that he asked if he could come along. And he explains it later that he wanted to get out of the house, and he wanted to spend time with Summer, because Summer was like a sister to him. Okay, so now the funny thing is nobody ever mentions any fishing poles. There was never any sign of any fishing poles anywhere. But supposedly they're going fishing. Okay, now, so before they left Hunter's yard with Summer and Candace, the grandma apparently called from the emergency room and was ready to be picked up. So Hunter sits in the front seat, driver's side. Candace is driving, and Summer is in the back seat. Okay, and there's apparently 3 seats in the back seat. They're divided into 3 seats. Okay, and Hunter mentions having to move some boxes around. Now, why would there be boxes in the car? Obviously, Grandma got taken to the emergency room. in the front seat, so why was there a box in the front seat? Had to put in the back seat where Summer was. I mean, you got to listen to this, guys. Listen to this interview, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Some stuff does, but some stuff doesn't. So apparently there's these boxes they're moving around in the car, okay? I'd like to know what was in those boxes, honestly. Okay, so now, so Summer's in the back seat, he's on the driver's side front seat, and Candace is driving. Okay, no mention of any fishing rods or anything like that. Okay, which is suspicious. Okay, now, he says that Summer was wearing a pink tank top and shorts. But prior to them getting in the car, Candace took Summer into Hunter's house and changed her into her bathing suit. Okay? So now, they were talking about going to Jonesboro Water Park later that day. I don't know why that came up. But then they had, since Grandma got out of the ER so soon, and they were going to go pick her up, so they just changed the plan to swimming, I guess. I don't know. That doesn't make a lot of sense either. So they leave Hunter's house to go pick up Grandma at the hospital. Then they go to Walgreens, and this clarified some things. They were going to drop off the prescription, but they didn't go inside. It was a drive-up window, so that was clarified. So they went to go fill the prescription, drop it off, and they were in line at the drive-up. So they were all in the car at the time. So there's Grandma, Hunter, Summer, and Candace in the car. Now, excuse me, he says that Dawn calls, and for some reason, he must have known it was that Dawn calling, because she had her phone like on the console there between the seats. And I think he saw his name pop up, but from what I can gather. But anyway, he says that he either turned the volume, must have been watching some video or something on his phone, and he turned his phone off or down so he could find out what the conversation was about. I don't know why he was so interested, but Candace says that Dawn said there was some guy hanging out at their property trying to touch the kids. Okay, so now this again doesn't make any sense, because she's saying that the boys went to work with Dawn. And now Dawn's calling saying there's some guy hanging around the property trying to touch the kids. Now, which story is true? I guess none of us are going to know. Then Mr. McDonough, doing the interview, he asked, well, who is this person? And they were talking about Billy, some old drunk that used to get in fights with his wife, and then he would come out and stay on their property in the shed. Okay? But then there was some confusion. He asked him about, well, what do you mean he was touching the kids? And then it changed to, oh no, he had the hots for Grandma. Okay? So that whole story is convoluted. Okay, and then he asked, well, why was Dawn calling? And he said, well, Dawn regularly checks on her while he's at work, checks on Candace, like every couple hours. That's strange, but I think it's going to make sense, okay, guys, because why else would the husband be checking on the wife and kids every couple hours? Unless he was worried about something, okay? So, they also mentioned this guy who used to try to touch the kids got arrested, but he slept in his shed on the property. Now, whether this is true or not, this is just what this Hunter is telling Mr. McDonough in the interview. Okay, now, how does Dawn know this, that there's some guy at the property right now trying to touch the kids when he's supposed to be at work and supposedly has the kids with him at work? Big question mark, okay? So now, the next place they went to is after picking up Grandma, they went to go get cigarettes at a discount tobacco store. And apparently this was right across from Long John Silver's. Now, here's the seating arrangements that Hunter said. So Candace was driving, Grandma's in the front seat, Hunter was sitting on the passenger side back seat, and Summer was sitting in the middle. That's what he said. Okay? Now, when Candace went into the tobacco store, she bought him a puff bar, a black and purple one, and a blue one for her. Okay? These are nicotine vapes, apparently. She also bought like a big can of Twisted Tea. He said how many, Mr. McDonough asked how many did she buy, and he said 1. I was a little bit thinking like, okay, maybe it was 1 6-pack, because if you remember, the guy that did the video out at the swimming hole where they had been, he found all these yellow Twisted Tea cans, which is an alcohol, drink, and there was more than just one out there, okay? So that's suspicious to me. I don't think she just bought 1, because then he says that he asked her if he could have that 1, and she gave it to him. Okay, but I think there was more than 1. That's my gut feeling. Okay. At some point, Mr. McDonough asks him, what does he think happened with Summer? And he says they must have done something because she would not walk off the property. So he's suspecting that, somebody did something to her at home of the family. Okay, now, the next thing they do is they go to the swimming hole. And remember, Summer had her bathing suit on already. And she was apparently snuggling onto Hunter, kind of hugging his arm. And the windows were down. He was watching TikTok videos in the back seat while, Summer was snuggling with him. And she was a snuggly person. Okay, then they get out of the car and Candace gives him the Twisted Tea because he asked for it. And he says she didn't have any herself because she was driving. Now, that to me felt like she told him to say that, okay? So now, Summer goes into the water by herself, according to him. And Candace and him are looking at their phones. She's showing him TikTok videos and different things. They're not paying attention to Summer. She's in the water swimming by herself. Grandma was still in the car at this point, refilling her Straight Talk phone. Okay? Now, while they were swimming, while she was swimming, Candace took a TikTok video of, that's the one we all have seen, of Summer swimming in the water by herself. Okay? So at some point, Grandma came out of the car and then Candace, they were all looking at their phones. They weren't paying attention to Summer at all. Okay? And it's pretty clear from what he says in this interview that that's the case. Now, then he just happened to notice that he didn't see Summer anymore in the water and figured she must have went under. He really, if you listen to what he says, first he says 5 seconds, then he realizes, well, she may have been under before I noticed that she was missing or I couldn't see her. So he really had no idea. None of them did. How long she was under the water. Nobody knew. Especially not Candace and Grandma. They weren't looking at all. Okay, so according to what he said, he doesn't seem extremely alarmed because he doesn't know if she just went under the water just a few seconds ago or not. And he said sometimes she would tease him and swim underwater and then pop up and tease him. So he wasn't overly alarmed. But so he took the time to take his shirt off and, get in the water and then find her and pull her up. And he said, and it's hard to hear this part. I had to go over it a couple times. It's really kind of hard to hear him. He's not facing the camera and there's a lot of noise in the background. So, but he mentioned something about, and you can almost miss it if you don't listen carefully, that he put her up on his shoulders. Okay? So at that point, she could have fallen off his shoulders. We don't know. Okay, now, so then, after that, Candace was videotaping after that. That's when she videotaped the shot of him without his shirt on. And then, a little bit of the area there. And he asked Hunter, could she have been injured at that time? And it was really interesting because Hunter said, well, she could have had like that dry drowning thing they're talking about, but I didn't see anything wrong. But then he, for some reason, mentions them sitting in the hot car. So for some reason, Hunter thought that was important when they were just talking about, being swimming or at the swimming hole, and then he mentions the hot car. So we'll get to that in a minute. But, so at first he said it could have been 4 seconds, but then he, then when he explained it, he said he doesn't know how long she was under the water. Apparently Candace and her mom and grandma were looking for flowers, and I'm presuming these were flowers they were going to dig up and transplant because of the way it sounded. Okay, now, he said that after they were done swimming, that Summer walked back to the car. So she walked, nobody carried her, so he thought she was fine. Okay, and then he said something about, he kind of skipped to 15 minutes later, they went to go pick up the prescription, but then Mr. McDonough did such a wonderful job in this interview. Boy, you guys gotta see it. I'll tell you about the link to it at the end here. But, because he kept asking questions, well, what happened next after, you guys went back to the car? And then, instead of him saying, well, we went to get the prescription, he added something that he wasn't going to add before. And lo and behold, they went to the hippie house. The hippie house was a place where they sell CBD oil and, marijuana puffs, okay? Or I don't know exactly what they're called. They're the inhalers with the THC or whatever it's called. Okay, so what you're gonna get a little high off of that. So, all right, so they go there for 5 minutes, and Grandma goes along. Grandma goes into the hippie house too, and they leave Summer and the boy in the car in the back seat. Okay, and he says that. Now, he was talking about watching TikTok earlier while they were at the swimming hole. But now he says he doesn't really watch TikTok. He was in the back seat of the car, and Summer was talking about her LOL dolls that she likes. And he was showing her a Poppets video, some children's video on his phone. Okay, now Candace comes out of the hippie house, and this is what he said. And she had bought 2 vapes. Now these are not the nicotine vapes. These are the other kind of vapes, okay? And she had one for him and one for her. Then they went to go get the prescription. So now they were back in line at the drive-up window picking up the prescription, okay? And now he says that he was sitting in the middle seat and Summer wasn't by the window, passenger side. Grandma was still there and Candace was still driving. But he also mentioned something strange. Now, I don't remember seeing a pillow in that photograph of her in the back of the car, but he said that she sat there because she was sitting on a pillow because she was wet. Now, oh my gosh, you guys, how crazy can this be? You saw they had different clothes on her, and I don't know if she still had her bathing suit on, so why would she still be wet? Obviously, they didn't take any towels with them, maybe. I don't know. But this whole thing is crazy, guys. Okay, so he's saying she's wet, so they set her on a pillow. He was sitting in the middle. Okay, I guess the spot was open. Okay, now, oh my gosh. He also had mentioned that he hadn't been to Candace's house in a year because Mr. McDonough asked what happened to that pillow. He says, I have no idea. Okay, so now, and Hunter, bless his heart, he says that he has impulsive ADHD. I looked that up, and what that means is actions without foresight, that they sometimes can do actions without foresight. And, that's all I really read about it. But Okay. He doesn't remember, now, when they went home, dropped him off, he doesn't remember her sleeping when they dropped him off. He thought she was awake. But he wasn't paying a lot of attention at this point because he'd probably vaped his vape and had drank that, drink and God knows what else. Okay. But that happened later when they got out. But the next stop they made was Sonic. Now, if you guys remember, if you go back to my part 1 about Summer Wells, and you can remember, well, I would just watch it because I was adamant about my gut feeling telling me this was all about drugs, all about drugs. I said in the beginning of my video. And I also mentioned something about when did they eat? Did Summer have any food that day? Well, I got my answer to that with this interview that Mr. McDonough did on his show. No, they didn't have any food the whole dang day. So what they do, they go to Sonic. And when he was telling this story, I'm thinking, oh, good, they went to Sonic. Because they have hamburgers there and stuff, I think. And I'm thinking, oh, they finally ate. But oh no, guess what? They didn't eat. They all had slushies. According to Hunter, that Summer had a blue one, he had a blue one, Candace had a purple one, and Grandma had an orange one. Okay, so now, they've been doing out there, puffing and all the stuff, drinking, and nobody's eating. Poor Summer's probably starving. Well, then fill her full of a bunch of sugar. Because remember I said in my part 1, her blood sugar was probably low? Well, okay. I'm just saying that I said it, okay? Way back then, and that was, 2-3 weeks ago I mentioned this. Okay, but watch my video, part 1, you'll see. Okay, so then they went to the Priceless grocery store. Now, this is what's interesting. It's right next to the liquor store. No surprise there, okay? Candace and Grandma go into the store. He says they were in that hot car for almost an hour. He thought it was an hour, okay? They asked him, Mr. McDonough asked him, there was like a bottle of red or orange drink on that seat, on that picture of Summer sleeping in the back seat, on the seat, and I had wondered about that myself. He didn't know nothing about that. And also there was supposedly Skittles in the car that Grandma had bought for Summer. But those were Summer Skittles. Okay, and I did a little checking on that too. Skittles is, some of the candies that, 4 or 5-year-olds can choke on pretty easy if they're not watched. Okay, now, then they went and got groceries, okay? After the hour was up, they put a lot of the groceries in the back of the truck bed and the milk in the back seat. He said they gave it to him, and he didn't want to be responsible for spilling it or breaking the jugs or something, so he said he had it in his lap. But then when he got out of the car, he said he put it in the middle of the seat. Okay? So there's a bunch of confusion here. Because we don't, we thought Summer was on the left side of the car. He was sitting on the right side of the car. But, so no one knows how the milk got propped up against her like that. On the other side of her. Because if he was sitting on the other side of her, and he put the milk in the middle when he got out, it should have been on the right side of her, not on the left side of her. So that's a big mystery. I really don't think, though, that he remembers that part of it. Okay, they probably don't remember a lot of what happened that whole entire day, the way it's sounding to me, because of their condition. But now, and I'm not being nice anymore, I'm just fed up with this whole thing, because it's all about the drugs. It's all about the drugs, guys, and that's what I said from the very beginning, and now we're finding out that's true. Wait till you hear the rest. Okay, so now the next thing you know, she goes home. I guess that his mom had come out and had talked a little bit, but they didn't stay long. They were in a hurry. Okay, so now she calls about 7:30 to talk to Hunter and says that Summer is missing, and he's very revealing at this point. Hunter says, you know, when Candace got drunk and high at the same time, this was a usual occurrence. That there was times when the children, she'd call and say the kids are missing, and he'd say, well, go look outside, and they would be outside. I mean, that's how drunk and high he says that she would get, okay? That she would lose all reality of where the kids were, okay? Now, that's very telling. So now, oh, I just can't believe this, you guys, you know? So then, for some reason, after she called him, Hunter called his mother. He was at the park with his girlfriend at the time when she called at 7:30 that night, the night Summer came up missing. But he calls his mother, Allie, and he says, you know, Candace might be calling. She can't find Summer, and you know how she gets, or something like that. Okay, so, oh my gosh. So that was the end of that. And then Candace calls him the very next day to talk about a polygraph. And but TBI had told him, because I guess they'd questioned him already, not to contact Candace anymore. Okay, and TBI took Hunter's phone, which he was very upset about because he's a teenager, you know. Okay, but Candace came the day after the polygraph, which I believe was Thursday, came to Hunter's house, and she kind of like, you know, told him not to mention the alcohol. She tried to warn him, tried to, you know, warn him about saying certain things, is what he said. And he didn't, I don't think he cared for that very much. Okay, now, so they asked, Mr. McDonough asked him, you know, what do you think happened? And he said that he thought that Candace had something to do with Summer's disappearance. And he said all she cares about is the money. And they, you know, it has something to do with this reward money that got put out. And I guess Candace was scurrying up to the police station when she found out about the $25,000 rewards. I don't know what that was all about. But he said a very sweet thing, this young man. He said, you know, if it was my daughter, I wouldn't be sitting around the house collecting dust and money. I'd be out there looking for her. You know, and that 15-year-old who has, you know, ADHD and has some, you know, problems in his life, he has the compassion enough to understand that what Candace was doing was not right, and that he could have done better if it was his daughter. You know, that was really sweet. But he also asked him about his gut feeling, and he seemed to implicate the grandma. He said, you know, the grandma might have something to do with it. She's very grumpy and controlling. This was Hunter's words. You know, grandma's being silent, so who knows. But they also mentioned the swing again. He mentioned the swing. He says something about she would never, I can't remember his exact words, you'll have to watch it, but something about the swing, missing from the swing. She wouldn't be missing from the swing, or something like that. You know, so this keeps making me wonder that, you know, Candace wasn't watching those kids at all when she got home. That's, you know, my gut feeling is she was high, she was stoned, she was drunk. She was out of it, you guys. You know, she was out of it. If somebody would have even came to the house to take her, she probably wouldn't have even noticed. You know, I mean, who knows if the boys were there, boys weren't there. You know, was Don at home, was Don not at home? Nobody seems to know. This case just keeps getting stranger and stranger and stranger, but, you know, with my abilities of seeing things, you know, I've seen the whole thing play out in my psychic vision, and that was one of the first things I knew and felt and saw, was this whole thing has to do with drugs. And at one point, in this interview, you just gotta watch it, guys, it's amazing. At one point in the interview, he talked about Candace's drug dealer calling her and mentioned him by name. You know, this goes deep, guys, and it's sad, and it's a shame, and it's awful, and I'm so sick and tired of people that just ruin their lives with drugs and ruin their kids' lives with drugs. It's an epidemic in our country, and I just wish there was a magic wand to fix it, you know, but there's not. But anyway, guys, check out on YouTube the interview room with Chris McDonough, a retired police officer, and he's interviewed lots of people. He's very, very good. Please watch this interview and just listen to the whole thing. It's a little distracting because there's, you know, dogs barking in the background and there's a lot of stuff going on, but he's impeccable. He asks just the right questions, and he really knows how to tune in to the person that he's talking to. So, and if you get a chance to watch my part 1 of Summer Wells about the timeline, and, you know, I was picking up on a lot of this stuff before this was even came out, so it'd be interesting to watch that too. Okay, guys, I love you all. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.